President Buhari directs reversion of State House Medical Center to a clinic.
With this development, it's going to be really streamlined into a clinic that is meant to serve those that it was meant to serve when it was conceived ab initio.
Senate advocates inclusion of diabetes treatment in basic health care provision.
Diabetes is very, very, very critical. And if it's not already in the basic health care provision fund, we have to include it.
Vice President Oshibajo says federal government taking practical steps to improve the quality of lives of Nigerians.
Focus, the enterprise bank or the entrepreneur bank will focus on startups, on new businesses.
And on Good Morning Nigeria this Tuesday, we shall continue our conversation on budget template and priority spending of the 3 tiers of government.
Right, since Nigeria's return to democracy in 1999, that's 20 years ago, various tiers of government have indeed made various budgetary proposals and tried to execute those budgetary proposals using various themes and nomenclatures. Indeed, Kingsley, there has been budget of hope, budget of inclusive growth, budget of change, budget of consolidation, and so on. Right. But Kingsley, have these budgets, really lived up to their names? Well, Kirian, I mean, the answer is right there. It's obvious to all of us, and indeed many economic experts do argue that the humongous monies that have been budgeted by governments at all levels over the years have not translated to a corresponding development in the country. This then brings to question how public resources are allocated and utilized, what is behind the budget template of governments at the federal, state, and local government levels, and how do such budgets relate and respond to the yearnings of the masses. Now, the reason for such concerns are obviously not far-fetched, as existing infrastructure in critical sectors such as education, health, power, and agriculture are still a far cry from what is expected in the 21st century. And that's exactly why we want to continue our conversation or interrogation of budgeting templates and priority spending of the various tiers of government by expanding the conversation and issues thrown up in the first part of the topic yesterday. Of course, Kirian, we shall be asking, what are the drain pipes in our budgeting system? And how do we plug these leakages? What are also the causative factors of poor implementation of budgets in all tiers of government, and to what extent do the various subnational governments, that's to say the state and local governments, have their budget complementing the federal budget? Are we funding development or we are funding bureaucracies? Now, funding is the key word here, and the complementing national budgets is yet another, because that's the only way we can uniformly, develop the country. Now, we have assembled a number of experts to provide the answers. Thanks for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria today. My name is Kirian Umayo. And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Kirian in also welcoming you to this edition of the program, reaching you, as always, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're right here at our Abuja headquarters studios, Nigeria's capital city, and in the course of the program, we have our regular complimentary segments. These include newspaper review, business, and sports. In the meantime, let's take the highlights of the morning news, and here's our colleague, Ifeoma Ojinta. Hi, Ifeoma, good morning.
Good morning, Kingsley and Kirian, and here is the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari is in Dakar, Senegal, ahead of the Tuesday's inauguration of President Macky Sall for a second term in office. State House correspondent Adamu Sambu reports that the president arrived Leopold Senghor International Airport at about 8 o'clock Monday evening local time. On hand to accord him a befitting reception was a high-powered Senegalese government delegation led by the re-elected President Macky Sall. Others include the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyama, Nigeria's ambassador to Senegal, the National Security Advisor, the Director General of the National Intelligence Agency, and other senior government officials. President Buhari, who is the current chairman of ECOWAS, is expected to serve as special guest of honor at the Senegalese presidential inauguration ceremony, to be attended by other African leaders. The Nigerian leader is being accompanied by Governors Mohamed Abubakar of Bauchi, Nasir El-Rufai of Kaduna, and Umaru Tanko Al-Makura of Nasarawa states. Senegal is the first country to be visited by President Muhammadu Buhari since the renewal of his mandate by majority of the vote cast in the last presidential election. His own inauguration is scheduled for the 29th of May 2019. Vice President Professor Yemi Oshibajo says President Muhammadu Buhari's administration is taking practical steps to improve the quality of lives of Nigerians through its economic policies and multi-sectoral reforms. This is towards taking the country to the next level. The Vice President said this in Lagos while delivering the 50th convocation lecture of the University of Lagos.
Enterprise Bank or the Entrepreneur Bank will focus on startups, on new businesses. And the idea will be to fund these new businesses from startup to the point where they're able to go on their own. It's very clear that already so much is going on, and so many technology businesses in Nigeria are able to attract even funding, not just locally, but internationally.
Now, to whom much is given, much is expected is an age-long saying which resonates with the Ninth Assembly. In this regard, it becomes expedient that newly elected federal lawmakers are given the prerequisite orientation that is expected to engender cordial working relations with other arms of government, especially the executive.
I think there's more they need to do beyond that. But I think the most important thing for the members and the senators and members-elect is to work ahead and to understand the rules and the procedures that are required.
President Muhammadu Buhari has directed that the State House Medical Center revert to a clinic to serve the original purpose of its establishment. Permanent Secretary, State House, Jalal Arabi, made this known in Abuja when he appeared before the Senate Committee on Federal Character and Intergovernmental Affairs for the 2019 Budget Defense.
Second family and those working within and working around. You know, part of the challenges the then medical center had been going through was the overstretching of facilities based on the incoming patients to it. That wasn't what it was meant for. But with this development, it's going to be really streamlined into a clinic that is meant to serve those that it was meant to serve when it was conceived ab initio.
And the National Assembly is advocating the inclusion of diabetes treatment in basic health care provision. This was during the budget defense session of the Ministry of Health before committees.
The issue of diabetes is very, very, very critical. And if it's not already in the Basic Health Care Provision Fund, we have to include it in terms of either it's a subsidized drug or we make sure at least people, the vulnerable, they get it.
Ministries, departments and agencies are encouraged to defend their budgetary estimates on time in order to facilitate quick passage of the 2019 budget proposal. Chairman House Committee on Banking and Currency, Jones Chukwudi Onyeri, stressed this while commenting on the non-appearance of the Nigerian Export and Import Bank's management at a budget defense session.
Becomes a major issue for us because there's nothing for us to work on. As we speak, we don't have the budget of Nexim before us. We thought they would have sent this budget days before now, or at best, bring it at this budget defense hearing.
Despite shortage in Nigeria's revenue generation, the country is able to push its 2018 budget performance to 100% debt service allocation and about 66% for the overhead. Minister of Finance Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed mentioned this while defending the 2019 budget estimates before the Senate Committee on Finance.
Processes is really hampering the effectiveness of the performance of the budget, and I really do hope that in the next assembly, the Senate will look at how to improve on our procurement process.
The suspended Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onnoghen, has opened his defense in the alleged forced declaration of assets at the Code of Conduct Tribunal. The defendant called his first witness at the day's sitting.
Like I said, I will do so to the best of my ability. I'm happy that this case is now going on. He has opened his defense and we are going on.
And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Kirian after this break.
A new edition of TV Guide is out with special focus on the role of the media in election coverage. Exclusive on the National Broadcasting Commission, its mandate as the sole regulator of Nigerian media. Dr. Toma Daba then and Ishak Modibo Kawu now. This edition also features the king of stand-up comedy in Nigeria, Ali Baba. NTA standard to be ready for election transmission after decades of abandonment. Find out from the DG transactional elections in our political space. An evil wind that blows no good. DG, National Orientation Agency caution. TV Guide, your indispensable companion, x-rays the impact of social media on electioneering process as electorates present their expectations from incoming government. Meet some TV professionals behind the screen and other inspiring stories in sports, entertainment, and lots more. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words. Run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
And this is Good Morning Nigeria and the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, let's turn to business. The federal government opens subscription for April savings bond. Joy Uzo has this and other business stories.
Welcome to Business News. The federal government of Nigeria, through the Debt Management Office, has offered for subscription savings bond for the month of April. The 2-year savings bond due April 10, 2021 is at an interest rate of 11.276% per annum, while the 3-year paper due 13th April 2022 is at an annual interest rate of 12.276%. Both offerings opened Monday. And significant success was recorded in the information technology ICT industry as foreign and local investors staked about 38 billion naira on Nigerian startups in the second and third quarter of 2018, of which 75% of the fund went into Nigerian fintech. This was disclosed at a roundtable in Lagos by the Director General of the Nigerian Information Technology Development Agency, NITDA, Dr. Issa Pantami. He called on stakeholders to defend indigenous products and services so as to save the country from capital flight and create jobs for unemployed youths. Meanwhile, a Nigerian entrepreneur, Jamil Usman, wants tax administrators in the country to redefine their mode of operations and impose heavier taxes on industrialists and companies with multiple property. He said this would ensure fairness to every class of the society.
And CAS after one car, yours and your wife, then from 3 upward, you are going to pay tax, if it is 2%.
Finally, trading on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange closed on a negative note to begin the week and the month of April. The NSE All-Share Index lost as much as 1.64% to close at 30,531.69, while market capitalization stood at 11.5 trillion naira. 1.724 billion shares exchanged hands by investors in 3,251 deals, valued at 3.678 billion naira. That's business news. Good Morning Nigeria continues.
All right, thank you very much, Joy Uzo, for that business package. Next for us on the program is a review of the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
And let's welcome Bayo Atoyebi, our newspaper reviewer, for analysis of today. Good morning, Bayo.
Good morning, Kyria. Thank you. Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning,
Bayo.
Nigeria.
Good to see you. Kyria, let's begin with you. I need your people.
All right, I have...
are busier.
All right, I have the Punch newspaper. Let's turn to Punch newspaper. Above the nameplate, we may start selling petrol above 145. That's Ipman. That's on page 28. And then that's above the nameplate. APC will face setbacks in 2023 if Oshomole is not tamed, says Okorocha. That's on page 2. And Nigeria's death profile among lowest in the world. Oshimbajo, that's the vice president, is on page 42. We will wait for Supreme Court's pronouncement on Zamfara, APC, says INEC. Details on page 21. And just below the nameplate, we have... the lead story on the Punch newspaper for this morning. 9th Assembly, that's the kicker. APC reacts as Saraki says senators should decide their leaders. With some writers here, what is important is for the members of the Senate to decide who is the best to lead them so that they can have stability, says the Senate President. And in response, members of the minority party should mind their own business. They should find a way of occupying the positions that belong to them, says the APC. And below the photograph on the Punch newspaper, we have a regulatory bottleneck, slow down drone revolution in agricultural sector. We can find that story on pages 34 and 35. Mom sent new month message to slain football fan on Monday, says brother. It's on pages 4 and 5. And then Air Force kills 5 bandits in Zamfara, rescues 2 women. Details on page 10.
All right, let's also take a look now at the Nigerian Tribune. Nigerian Tribune from top to bottom, just below the nameplate of the paper. It says, Okorocha in Aso Rock accuses Oshomole of jeopardizing APC's chances. That's page 4. Suspected policeman who killed football-watching youth arrested. That's page 31. Rivers, police beef up security as INEC resumes collation of results. The lead story says, with a kicker, Obasanjo to PDP, purge yourself of hypocrites and bad eggs, and accuses some members of being after their pockets and stomachs, restates that Atiku better than Buhari. Now, other headlines there on the front page, Sambisa Forest will be turned into Ecosystem Resource Center. That's according to the Army. That's on page 2. Don't attend any other meeting on Inauguration Day, Saraki tells senators and reps-elect. Don't attend any other meeting on Inauguration Day, Saraki tells senators and reps-elect. Bayo, that's some sound advice.
Because
that's sound advice.
He benefited from the loophole.
Other headlines there on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune. Aggrieved Ibadan Obas in fresh crisis with Olubadan, page 4. And on page 35, judiciary workers protest in Kogi over alleged plot to remove CJ, that's Chief Judge. Onoren opens defense and witness tenders receipt for 2010 asset declaration form as tribunal subpoenas CCB staff. Bayo,
Well, let's start from the human interest story angle. Unfortunately, an operative of the Special Anti-Cultism Squad, there is this squad to check cultism in Lagos, are reported to have shot into the air to disperse a crowd at Onipeteshi, that is a suburb of Lagos. The SAC operatives had actually arrested a man in dreadlocks, but residents protested that he cannot be arrested. One of the SAC operatives shot into the air to scare away the crowd. In the process, Kolade Johnson, who was at the area to watch a Liverpool versus Tottenham match, got hit and he died. And ultimately, the mother had actually sent a message to him because it was on the eve of this April month, on 31st of March. And in that message, the mother had said to him, "May this new month be a blessing to you." And one of the noteworthy remarks in the message, which has turned very providential, was that may you have favor and divine upliftment, and may you never suffer out of danger for untimely death. Sadly, the bullet that hit him. Yes, and he didn't get the message. It was his brother who had the telephone, who saw the message after he got the information that the boy has been shot. But the Lagos State Police Command says that the team involved in the incident are in custody. Commissioner of Police Zubairu Ma'azu has said that and they will face internal disciplinary action and possible prosecution if they have found to be complicit in that death.
Could this be accidental discharge or misdirected bullets or something? Because, you know, he's watching football match somewhere. He was not at the scene of the incident.
He had gone to the area to watch a football match.
So he was within the vicinity of the
SAT operative had apprehended a man who was in dreadlocks. They wanted to arrest him, maybe questioning, they were suspicious of him. But the people in the area came around to say, no, you can't arrest him. And in the middle, you know, it will attract a crowd. Everybody will come and want to watch. Right. And the operative started shooting into the air. And somehow, one of the discharged bullets got to hit him.
Two issues there, in my opinion. One has to do with what ballisticians will refer to as finger discipline. Why is it that our law enforcement agents are quick, to pull the trigger?
Don't they even account for the bullets that they use?
Precisely. Even those, who were trying to resist the arrest of that individual, were they armed? Were the lives of the SARS operatives in danger at that material time?
It's SACS, Special Anti-Cultism.
Yes, Anti-Cultism. Yeah, whatever their name is. I mean, I'm just saying, were they armed? What was the level of threat that required them to be firing into the air?
Exactly.
That's one point. Second point has to do with profiling. Because a man is in dreadlocks means that it necessarily belongs to a secret court. I mean, there are some of the reports that I've read that said that, look, the guy is an artist. He participates, in all kinds of things, yes, which is why the
people gather
to say, why are you picking up this guy?
Because they know him.
They know him and
know his activities.
And at some point, if you recall, when people were saying no to SARS, because they were indiscriminate arrest of persons who were presumed to be Yahoo boys. If you were a young man and you were good looking and so on and so forth.
And you have a computer.
They say, oh no, you must be a Yahoo boy. That's profiling.
All right. Continue, Bayo.
Well, the other story of interest also relates to the situation of power. Federal government says that it plans to decentralize power sector, and the initiative is to encourage the private investors to generate power. This was part of the moves that is intended to address the poor power situation in the country. This was revealed by the Vice President, who was speaking at the 50th convocation lecture of the University of Lagos. And he said power generation had increased from 4,000 to 8,100. However, the challenge has been that it has been difficult for them to transmit. He said there is also a challenge with the metering access program, which has now been put in place to resolve the challenges of metering for all those who consume electricity. The government has, in the last 18 months, taken on transmission challenges by completing transmission projects through TCN and NDPHC. The whole process is to ensure that the power that is available can be conveyed to consumers. But he said specifically that power the Vice President says specifically that over 2,000 megawatts of power is not taken by DISCOs due to poor tariff collection. Therefore, there has been initiative to ensure that the challenges for metering is taken on and meters are provided for electricity consumption. The Vice President is also an alumnus of University of Lagos. You know, as they often say, there are only two universities, the University of Lagos and the others. Some like those, villagers in Nsukka, Samaru, and Ife.
No, what I've always heard is there are two universities, UNN and the rest. How
there you are.
I'm not an alumnus of...
What is UNN?
What is UNN?
No, yes, spell it
University
out.
of Nigeria.
That's right.
That's number one, before any other...
You know, since we're on this, I should be careful. You know, how I say.
You belong to the two camps.
There was Professor Ikenna Nzimiro, a Marxist sociologist at UNN before he moved over later to University of Port Harcourt. He used to brag to students then, while he was at UNN, that if you wrote a letter to him from outside the country, all you needed to write was Professor Ikenna Nzimiro, University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Whether you put Nsukka there or not, you see material. That post it from anywhere you went,
and it will get to Nsukka village.
All right, now
don't forget, Nsukka is one of the places that give birth to Nnamdi Azikiwe.
Yes. All right, now let's return to the newspaper review now. Daily Trust newspaper. Below the nameplate, well, we read that Obasanjo to the PDP, purge yourselves of hypocrites, and then besides that we have State House Clinic to serve only Buhari, Obasanjo's family staff. Well, I don't know. Well, you get that story details on page 3 because that's not what we had earlier this morning. Just look up the story and find out yourself. Now, reduce poverty in 1 year. Daily Trust economists tell Buhari. It's on page 17. And now, the lead story here, which is very, very important, is kidney disease patients groan over cost of dialysis. And I'd like Bayo to talk about this. And if you go further down, you will see some graphic and statistic illustrations there showing some challenges of dialysis in Nigeria. Well, of course, the reason is not far-fetched. But at the bottom of the Daily Trust, we have an organs driver testifies, tenders, assets declaration receipts on page 3. River selection resort collation begins today on page 4. Saraki to new National Assembly members, don't stay out on Inauguration Day.
Okay, let me take stories from the Nigerian pilot. Nigerian pilot below the name flag. Nigerians should decide the number of parties they want. That's according to INEC, and the report is on page 12. Nigerian Air Force, NAF, battles rampaging bandits in Zamfara. And the list story says, why I was re-elected. That's according to President Buhari, with a number of riders there, says his performance led to his success at the polls. Insists he wouldn't have induced the large crowd at his campaign rallies. Wouldn't have, he couldn't have. Yes, not that he wouldn't have, couldn't have. And promises better days ahead after his swearing in, and thanks Nigerians for supporting him. Now, let's see there, the president with the outgoing governor of Imo, who still hasn't received a certificate of return as a senator-elect, with the president at the villa yesterday, plus other stories arising from that visit. Senate uncovers for the 2 billion naira fraud in ministry's 2019 budget. That's page 7. And other headlines there, Nigeria, Ghana immigration officials in reconciliatory talks over deportation. Orphans of demolished home reject accommodation provided by FCTA. That's page 10. Buhari should have lobbied National Assembly for Mago's confirmation, says Saraki. And Amnesty International slams SARS over Lagos killings, says Oshibajo's reforms not working. That's on page 5. Very quickly, also from Leadership newspaper, Kieran, let me take this very quickly. Yeah. Below the nameplate, I'll do my best for every Nigerian in second term. That's according to President Buhari. And troops raid gun factory in Benue. Another headline there, this time with the Kika 2019 budget. Senators and ministers clash over 45 billion naira allocation to private firm. That's on page 4. Saraki and northern leaders disagree over National Assembly leadership.
Okay. Well, let me start with the assignment Kirian gave me about dialysis and liver. I know that dialysis is a process of treatment of kidney disease. By the time you get to dialysis, it means the kidney disease you have is in an acute stage. But one of the best ways to treat, to avoid that, is to prevent yourself from getting to be infected by any incidences that could lead to kidney disease. And the popular one is people will take what they call paraga. There is this concoction being carried around, and people believe that when they take it, it gives them strength. They are endangering their kidney. So this is the layman advice I can give in that direction.
And that's what, avoiding paraga, that's avoidance. What to do on the positive side, simple, experts will say, drink water, drink water, drink water.
The Chief of Army Staff...
Are you sure you drink enough water? The way you are looking at
because you are talking as if water has become a medication, but I know it's
water
good to drink water.
Yes.
It's good to drink water, no doubt about that.
It's the best medicine for that.
But I can assure you that some of the people who are suffering kidney disease, some of them are also good water drinkers. There's no statistics that show that.
But what water does, according to the experts, is to help reduce the incidence of kidney stones, which is the presence of kidney stones could lead to kidney affliction, and so on and so forth.
The Chief of Army Staff has identified 14 forest game reserves in the country that have become sanctuaries for kidnappers, bandits, and terrorists. Lieutenant General Tukur Burutai identified 3 in Zamfara, 3 in Borno, including Sambisa, 2 each in Niger and Bauchi State and Kano, while there's 1 each in Yobe and Katsina. And he says that he was talking to a seminar of combating security challenges associated with forests and protected areas. He lamented that rather than being protected areas for animals and plants and sites for tourists, they have now become sanctuaries for criminals, kidnappers, bandits, insurgents, and terrorists. The Chief of Army Staff said that exercise Harbin Kunama has now been put in place, and the Army is deploying personnel and logistics to ensure that they are deployed to those and they are going to flush out all these criminals from identified forests. Talking about Governor Rochas Okorocha of Imo State, Governor Rochas Okorocha says the election results declared for Imo governorship flouted Section 179 of the Constitution. He says that the section demands that the winner should score the highest votes, also 25% of votes in 2/3 of the local government area. He said the winner declared by INEC had 135,000 votes for 24 local governments. But for 3 other local governments, he scored 130,000 votes, which he didn't meet the percentage required. On the issue of the leadership of the National Assembly, he says the Southeast must be taken into consideration. The nation will not be balanced if Southeast is not carried along in the affairs of the nation. The governor who came to invite President Muhammadu Buhari to commission projects in Imo State that he is waiting patiently for INEC to release his certificate of return. Said, I have not contravened any section of the Constitution and I have not done anything wrong. INEC withdrew certificate of return for some candidates who were allegedly to have induced declaration of result under duress.
Okay, that Roger's issue is a different matter altogether. It has to be sorted out politically. And now let's go to the Daily Sun. Very briefly, Daily Sun. Just beside the nameplate of Daily Sun, which says Nigeria's problem, implementation of ideas, says Osinbajo, that's the vice president. Nigeria's problem, implementation of ideas. And that will be it for Daily Sun. Of course, the lead story is on CCT, Onogen opens defense, alleges interference to call CCB director as witness. Now let's go to the editorial for this morning, taken from the New Telegraph newspaper on page 15 to be precise. And it's on football. Amuneke's feat boost for Nigerian coaches. Nigerian coaches have recorded amazing feats at club and national team levels on the continent and beyond. And a few of them who traveled abroad performed well to boost the image of the country in football. Before Bayo comes in, we recall that Kasimayo Laloko was in charge of Gambian team. Christian Chukwu, sometime in Kenya. Stephen Keshi handled the national teams of Togo and Mali. And then the former skipper qualified Togo for the 2006 World Cup. But the crisis in the team led to his sacking. He also took Mali to the Nations Cup. But let's bring in Bayo here for further analysis of the Nigerian coaches making waves on the African continent.
Well, the kernel of the editorial is that the Nigerian Football Federation, and particularly the Association of Coaches, should create the enabling environment for coaches so that they can thrive, particularly so that they can also take their trade outside of Nigeria and flourish elsewhere. And it's predicated on the recent success of Amunike, who is the coach of the Tanzania team. And he has succeeded in qualifying Tanzania to be the African football AFCON Championship for 2019, after 39 years. And that is a wonderful feat. But like you pointed out earlier on, he's not the first Nigerian coach to have made successes outside the country. You mentioned Keshi, Sia and others, Kashima Aloko, Christian Chukwu. But the fact remains that even here domestically, we have a challenge that our players, our football administrators don't have confidence in our Nigerian coaches. And what is the rationale? Many of them eventually have been professional footballers, but it's not all coaching in football does not just require just having the experience of having played football. You're required to go to periodic coaching courses to update your knowledge in the sport, because the sport is very, very dynamic. And that is one of the challenges. The other one is that whenever you have an indigenous coach, the challenges we have as a nation, that of ethnic groups, becomes a challenge for the coach in selecting players. And consequently, every Nigerian tends to feel that when you have a foreign coach, then he's neutral and he gets to select the best players. But eventually, the foreigner has no idea. He depends on one or two persons of trust who eventually leads him.
And there are many a time when a Nigerian coach will qualify Nigeria for a very important, international engagement, and of course he will be dropped, and the foreign coach given, the nod. In fact, Kingsley must come in here because you are a football commentator. What he said is very, very apt.
What Bayo is saying is absolutely correct. The only thing to just add is that when we have local coaches, they will never pay him on time.
They don't pay him on time, and they pay him very poorly compared to the foreign coaches. If you pay them half of what you pay a foreign coach.
And some of them are still being owed up to today.
Yes.
There was an advocacy at some point, and it worked, to say, look, at some point, we should be proud to have Nigerian crew on the Nigerian bench or in the Nigerian, on the Nigerian side. And that the time had come for us to do away with these Johnny May coaches who were coming from Europe. You'll find them in different parts of the continent. They're just circulating around. One of the best examples on the African continent had to do with Egypt. Hassan Shehata. And you saw what he did with the Egyptian team, winning, a Cup of Nations, on a number of occasions. So I think, look at what happened to Siasia. Look at what happened to Stephen Keshi. These are guys, who recorded success. Christian Chukwu.
Many of them. No Nigerian coach that ventured into the nation's football team that didn't suffer one thing
Absolutely. Or the other. I think that maybe at some point we'll have to revert to that, because these are just foreign exchange leakages. And in the end, we had some foreign coaches before who would do nothing else but just stay here for a few days and then go and be resting.
Go and be resting.
Bayo.
And even on the world stage, if you take the census of nations that have won the World Cup, most often they are not. They are coached by the coaches from their city.
Exactly, because patriotism is also part of football.
No doubt about that. Yeah, it's cultural.
Yes.
Bayo.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for being around today. See you tomorrow midweek. Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll be taking on the second part of our conversation on the budgeting process as well as priority spending of all the 3 tiers of government.
A new edition of TV Guide is out with special focus on the role of the media in election campaign. exclusive on the National Broadcasting Commission, its mandate as the sole regulator of Nigerian media. Dr. Thomas Daba then and Ishak Modibo Kawu now. This edition also features the king of stand-up comedy in Nigeria, Ali Baba. NTA Standard Studio ready for election transmission after decades of abandonment. Find out from the DG transactional elections in our political space. An evil wind that blows no good. DG, National Orientation Agency, calls on TV Guide, your indispensable companion, x-rays the impact of social media on electioneering process as electorates present their expectations from incoming government. Meet some TV professionals behind the screen and other inspiring stories in sports, entertainment, and lots more. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
You are watching NTA, Nigerian Television Authority. For more information and news updates, visit our website at www.nta.ng, or you can follow us on Twitter at NTA News Now, or you can like us on Facebook at NTA Network News. Stay connected on our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/NTA News Online. Watch our live stream at www.nta.ng/live. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
The Nigerian Television Authority News 24 channel, your dependable all-round news station, offering you world-class news programs, documentaries, spotlights, promos, and information highlights. Take advantage of our network reach and advertise your interest, goods and services with us. NTA News 24, first among equals with digital broadcasting. You can reach us on Channel 21 Terrestrial TV and Channel 101 on the Star Times platform. For more inquiries, please call Henry on 0803 379 0884. Join us today.
This is Good Morning Nigeria, Tuesday's edition. And now let's take a background report as we, of course, continue our conversation on budgeting templates and priority spending. Let's now listen to excerpts of the first part of the discussion yesterday as put together by correspondent Serafina Okon.
Ideally, the budget cycle should start by July, when the ministries, departments, and agencies will start making their preparations so that by September, the budget estimates should have been presented to the National Assembly. And then the National Assembly will use those 3 months to look at the provisions and then call for the ministries, departments, and agencies to come and defend it and so on. But unfortunately, because we don't have a planning culture, it comes to a point whereby at the National Assembly, every member in the National Assembly will want to infuse as much programs as possible, and in the process of doing that infusion, valuable quality time is wasted deliberating over non-issues.
The ministers should interface with the National Assembly. It's not enough to just give a dog, what they try to do with the National Assembly, give a dog a bad name and hang it. When you interface with it, there should have been meetings, and I know there are meetings usually before the president lays the budget. You are telling the National Assembly, this is what we have in mind, this is what we are proposing. When it comes, when we are working on it, beside the MDAs coming to defend what they spent before and tell us how they intend to spend the money in the current estimates they are bringing, you still walk the corridors. In the private sector, that's how business is done. But it's in government that people don't show enough concern. So at the end of the day, you just come to the camera to say, okay, the National Assembly is not doing that, and we are saying, okay, fine. The last time we talked about padding, guess what? The agencies of government were the ones telling National Assembly members, put money in my agency.
There are statutory transferred, direct, at the budget, which goes to the National Assembly, goes to the National Judicial Council, goes to several other agencies. Nobody knows the details of those budgets. There are special funds, 4.18%, that goes to 4 places. Stabilization Fund, Ecological Fund, Natural Resource Fund, one other fund, 4 of them. The audit report of the federal government 2012 indicates that these funds are mismanaged.
Government needs to look at what people really want, and we need to have a system where citizens really have input in the budget. Because over the time in the budget process, government have not been really taking the citizen along in the drafting of the budget. So we need a system where citizens, through their representatives or through the CSO, will also be part of the budget process.
Really, what we're looking at as a nation in 2019 is not a spending of 8.8 trillion, but almost 20 trillion. And I think what is then interesting is for us to have a national conversation around how much of this 20 trillion is actually going to go to public works, how much of it is going to go to recurrent spending, and then to fashion out something that's coherent around a national agenda.
All right, now those were excerpts from our conversation yesterday on budgetary templates and priority spending of all the 3 tiers of government. Kieran, I mean, you and I were on set yesterday. You recall, in addition to what we've just relayed now, the guests also focused on the subnational governments. And one of the last clip there came from the Commissioner for Budget and Planning in Kaduna State, where he was talking about the need to focus more on the aggregate sum of the budget for the 3 tiers of government, that if you were to add that to 8.8 trillion by the federal government, you'll be looking at almost 20 trillion. Exactly. And then we now ask the question, what is it that the people get and the country gets from 20 trillion combined?
And Olani, you know, of the budget, you know, did also emphasize the fact that we have not had a local government budget in the past 20 years. And that tier of government, that is very, very important because it's closer to the people.
All right, so we are continuing our focus today on those aspects of the conversation, but drilling more into the subnational governments, that's to say state governments as well as local governments, and what needs to be done to tidy up things. We have guests with us in the studios here as well as at our Lagos Network Center. Let's welcome Dr. Aminu Usman. He's Associate Professor of Economics at Kaduna State University. Dr. Usman, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you and good morning.
Okay. Also here with us in the studios, we have Ezenwa Nwagu. Of course, is an analyst of good governance plus electoral matters. Today we're not discussing elections, we are discussing good governance. Ezenwa, delighted to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And also with us here in the Abuja studios, Jibrin Sabo Kena, former chairman, Kena local government area of Nasarawa State, and of course a former Algon executive. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
It's my pleasure to be here.
And now from Lagos, we have joining us this morning Shuaibu Idris. Shuaibu Idris is a financial analyst. We're glad to have you this morning on the program.
Good morning, Kyria, and good morning, Nigerians, and thank you for having me.
All right, Shuaibu, once again, pleasure to have you with us, gentlemen. Well, let's begin on, you know, we know what the background issues are, budgetary process. Yesterday, Kyria, again, you recall, our guests dwelt so much on the process, but while we've been talking about the process today, our principal concern we have to do with priority budgeting or priority spending and why the knock-on effect isn't quite manifest. Since we are focusing on the subnational governments, perhaps we may wish to begin on a somewhat provocative note by bringing in Jibrin Kiana, who is a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, former chairman of Kiana local government in Nasarawa State and a former executive of Algon. Part of the general concern is that we have 774 local governments as part of the administrative structure of the country. But that if we were to aggregate the spend by these 774 local governments, the result you get is that we are too poorer for it and our country remains underdeveloped. Just what is wrong with the budgetary and priority spending by
and programs targeted to be accomplished at a particular time. So it means that it goes back to say that an irony that we just believe important aspect of reflection that we need to do so that we know that we are getting it wrong because we have been climbing the mountain from the top. They say the functions of a local government council. The main function of local government councils are as follows. And please listen to this. The consideration and the making of recommendations to a state commission on economic planning or similar or any similar body or on the economic development of a state, particularly insofar as the areas of authority of the council and the states are affected. So for even the state to have the feel of what the people at the rural areas feel, they need input from the existing local government areas for them to now put in place their own budget system or budget requirements for the state. And it also goes to reflect on what the state needed to be inputted into the federal budget. That's why the gentleman, the young man who came in there said that the people's input is needed in the budgeting. So in the local government system, because the system has completely been defaced and given all sorts of bad names, you have no training, you have no human capital who have forgotten that they have the responsibility to develop. You don't have statistical department, you don't have any department that is scheduled to carry out this function of budgeting. What is usually done is a routine. There is allocation for A, B, C, D, and because 90% of expenditure in the local government system is recurrent. My first 6 months in office, when we aggregated what was expended, we had 96% recurrent expenditure outlay. It was only in the second year that we reduced that to 60% because we started trying to put a budget in place. So if Nigeria must get it right, to be able to account for where 20 trillion naira goes, is for us to look back how to give the local government system a life so that people can have their input as to what their needs are. And by that, it's only true that the system can begin to beef up requirements for the state and the state to the federal government. And it's only on that note that anybody, anywhere, can begin to monitor what the individual areas have already asked for and whether the federal government or state government are responding to it or what the local government have budgeted and whether they are following up on that. Because the local government system functions only at the beck and call of the state government. And it has decayed since 1999 to date. It has worsened because of the misjudgment, pardon me, Supreme Court judges, of the case that was brought, mischievously, with due respect, by the state government then to give interpretations to the various sections of the constitutions as to who is in charge of a local government. It was not who is in charge of bringing development to people. It was who is in charge of the local government so as to have access to the funding of the funds that are accruable to the local government areas. And since that judgment pronounced that the entirety of local government system does not exist until it only exists to the extent of the laws and administrative schedules of any state. So we do not exist. We exist in the Constitution, but the interpretation that the judgment has given has made the local government system non-existent in this country. And so the priority has always come back to say, let the priority of this administration, this next 4 years, is to give the autonomy, full autonomy to the local government system, and let the rot of the community be handled by the community themselves. As a starting point.
Hearing from former local government chairman is an indication that all is not well with that tier of government, especially since 1999, because good governance is a function of equitable distribution of scarce resources. And we are talking about budgeting here, which is, of course, about resources and how they are allocated and utilized. But I'd like to come to Ezenwa at this point. Now, what do you make of the explanation from the former chairman of a local government who has experienced this over time and is able to inform Nigerians that, look, as far as that tier of government is concerned, nothing is working with respect to budgeting. But we also understand the fact that governors of states actually do budgeting based on their own projections as to what they will also provide for the council areas under their domain. So how do you analyze this?
Well, thank you, Kirian. I just would have just kept quiet. I think he just closed the conversation on. But we need to just retrace to, first and foremost,
what is this leadership recruitment process for the local governments? What kind of process throw up leaders in the local government? We do know that the chief executives of states have ambushed the process of bringing leaders to the local. So across the country, subnational elections are not of interest to many of us. The kind of interest that elections elicits for House of Representatives, for House of, we don't show that level of interest. That is the basis. So what do we get? We get dominant political parties in states giving themselves 99%. And writing, in many cases, I've observed elections in a particular state where elections finished and the state resident electoral commissioner for the independent electoral commission just announced the results and said, if you want the details, please go to the, and that was the end. No protest, no contestation, nothing. So the quality of leadership recruitment process for subnational governments is where the challenge is. Now, when you talk about budget for states, Kirian, all you need to do is, how many states can you, as a citizen, get their budgets online right now? Just say, I want to see the budget of Eze State, and you see the details. These are the opaqueness in running those subnational governments, both in the state, is also a challenge for oversight. When the budget is being laid at the national, all of us are interested. NTA x-rays it, we bring everybody here, we talk about it. We will not be interested in. So our attitude really to subnational governance is where the challenge is, first and foremost. The elections that are conducted in those places do not elicit, not even our citizens' attention, not donor. The resources that is thrown into national elections, if you put half of that in subnational governments, we will have better leadership. We will have people who can say, look, like the former chairman said, he wants to do a budget. He sends it to the deputy governor's office, and he's challenged. There are even governors who will tell you straight, openly, and say, look, so you want to contest election? Why you are doing what you're doing is that you want to usurp my power. That's the bigger challenge of where we are. And I think that until we begin to pay much more attention to what happens at that subnational level, we will, like he said, be always building from the top. And we're interested in that. Even for us at the national level, once you discuss budget, the budget estimates has been laid, our attention ceases from there. We no longer follow. We are not interested. We don't even know what eventually is being spent, because my friend from Budget talked about oversight. Citizen oversight is very, very important for what you are talking about, following those priority spending. And I can give you an example. You could have money budgeted for hospital, building new hospital. The chaps who have responsibility to do that will renovate the hospital. Renovation is not building, and so it is citizen oversight that is able to say, look, what is in this budget is not renovation. It is to build a standard hospital for who? For my benefit and your benefit. So we are not interested. We don't follow the letters. We're excited, oh, this, and you hear people tell you, oh, when the budget is released, and you ask him, what is in this budget that you're expecting that when it's released that we don't follow.
All right, Ezenwa Nwangwu, thank you very much. Dr. Aminu Usman, of course, the Associate Professor of Economics. What we are dealing with here is something that we all experience. We hear of these numbers at the national level. We hear of the numbers at the state level with all kinds of christening, all kinds of names. Budget of hope. Nobody says budget of disaster or budget of underdevelopment.
Certainly, yeah.
And to a lesser extent, local governments. As Kiana has indicated, a local government system is virtually in abeyance. But here we are. When you aggregate all of these sums, even at, say, 40% implementation, ordinarily, the gaps that we have in our infrastructure and all the other development challenges ought to be addressed. What are we not getting right, either with the process or with our priority spend?
Yeah, good morning. I think both. Both in the sense that we don't really set our priorities right. We don't know what are we going to spend money on that can have the right impact. Now, if government, you see, because like Alhaji Kiana said, is you just have a routine. There are figures last year, and then you're going to top it up this year. Nobody cares whether it is implemented or not. And government psych, or the people in government, their psych is big elephant projects or big projects. Now, if you pay a Julius Berger, for instance, just for instance, 100 billion, the government would like to announce that to show that they're actually implementing the budget. But the input in the activities of a large corporate like that substantially comes from abroad. Now, what will make impact on the economy? What will make every Nigerian to feel the impact of that release is if federal government, if government pays probably about 20, 30 local contractors, those who buy their cement, all their input within, those who contract some of their functions, or some of their contracts to local small contractors, those who will employ local bricklayers, local carpenters, so that the trickle-down effect can actually be felt. But I think in this scenario, what I'm getting happy about is that at least there's no consciousness that what we have been discussing before, we are strictly federal government budget. Because we call it national budget, but it's not national budget. Now it's not that we begin to think about national budget, where you have all the tiers of government put together. Then you can now see the quantum of amount. Because if you come to discuss budget, we sometimes say, okay, federal government has budgeted just 100 billion or 150 billion for education, despite the size of the challenges of the education. We don't take into consideration that even TED Fund is not included in that figure. UBEC is not embedded in nomadic education and things like that. And no state government, no local government. Now, but it's very pathetic, like the former chair said, that local government doesn't exist. And every analyst kept emphasizing that development in this country, impact of government spending can never be felt from the federal. It has to be felt from the local government. Development can only come from the grassroots up. But from Abuja here, development cannot be actually promoted. So we don't even have priority. And I believe this country will only begin to experience some level of development by the time we begin to go back to where we came from, start having regular development plan, so that the entire focus of the economy, focus of the nation entirely, will be in one document where all the government, the federal government, the sub-national government will key into. Annually, you just take that document, pick this year's budget or projects or whatever, programs, then you now punch the figures. Make some adjustments based on current realities. Then everybody is keyed in. In this country, we have poor intergovernmental relations, if you like. There's actually no connect. What we have is the ritual of monthly federal National Economic Council, where governors come there only to emphasize on sharing, excess route. Governors will meet in a day before to ensure that how they can apply pressure to get extra money from Paris Club, from excess crude sales. But not actually how would they use that forum to promote coordinated development of the country. So sincerely, there's no system. And I think until we begin to spend money where it will create the necessary impact, it will continue to ravage. And our contracting system is also a key issue. Probably we are the most expensive country in terms of implementing projects, simply because there are some interests in some of the projects. What you can deliver in another country, probably in 1 billion, probably in Nigeria, you find that you deliver the same thing for 2-3 billion. So there's also the problem of the contract system. And then the timing. Now, there are some periods within the year that when government actually make releases, they will have more impact. Now, we have a rural economy. And then we have a rural economy, and the government right now is not thinking about how do we ensure that, resources actually goes down to the very local level.
we are going into the rainy season. People are preparing their farms. But two things are now making it difficult for anything to happen. The banditry has not been a priority area for the government. And like he said, the killing of the local government. If you go to any local government that is working, you can imagine the number of people that earn their living within the context of that local government. And that's where we can spring development, not from Abuja. Abuja is interested in big-ticket projects. But what ordinary citizens need is small projects that have impact on the life, that ease and upgrade, and ease their living standard and upgrade them at least a notch higher.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Going back to where we came from, I hope you don't mean for us to go back to the parliamentary system, you know, where, of course, we have...
I'm referring to actually going back to development planning.
Okay.
We have a focus, something that guides us. We started with India. India is probably about their 14th development plan now. We truncated our own at the 5th development plan. And look at where we are.
Where we are. All right. Thank you indeed. We will return to you in the course of the conversation. But now let's go to Dr. Aminu Usman, Associate Professor okay, that's you. Let's go to other guests. Yes, of course, Idris, you know, in Lagos Network Center. I'm sorry about that. Idris, let's get your opening comments, you know, because you have listened to other guests here, and of course you are appreciative of the fact that they have made some reasonable comments with respect to the subnational government, which is a major part of our conversation this morning. And now it has become so consistent that there is a disconnect when it comes to budgeting with respect to the third tier of government, which of course is where the majority of Nigerians are living. Now, what does this disconnect portend for the nation's development, especially at the rural level where we have majority of Nigerians?
Well, Kirian, if I were to answer your question just in one sentence, is what this process or what this exercise posit is doomed for the country, because English people say failure to plan is planning to fail. But it will be a bit uncharitable of me to just limit the conversation to that. I think I will definitely align my thoughts to what my brother Jibril Kiana has said and what Mr. Ezonwa also said, largely on the premise, on the fact that there does not appear to be a local government system of governance in the country as at today. However, what we probably need to take a cursory look at is where and how did we get it wrong. From the colonial masters, when we had the colonial administration in Nigeria and we had the district officers, and then we metamorphosed into provincial government, and then into the local government administration that we currently have, arising from what the late Dasuki reform of local government gave us, down to the military era. What exactly went wrong? The local government, or indeed the provincial government, were in existence and they were running budgets. They had, councillors or representatives. They had district officers, and all of them were working perfectly well. Did the system of local government administration collapse with the advent of the current democracy? Can we really say this, or is it a kind of a cancer that started a little earlier than the 1990 implementation of today's constitution, and that it gave us to what we have today? That is one question that we certainly need to take a critical review at, so that we'll find out where did we get it wrong, and when did we get it wrong, and what can be done. I think also I will align my thoughts to the issue of the process of electing, officials to run the local government. However, we shouldn't limit it to the process of getting local government leaders, but also the process of, throwing up leaders in this country. Does governors, or are governors supposed to run independent of, say, the state judiciary? Are they supposed to run independent of the state houses of assembly? What are those houses of assembly members doing in terms of their effort to checkmate, if you like, the impunity of governors? I think also we need to be a little careful here because what has been happening is, other than the 2 or 3 key positions in the country, Nigerians tend to not to bother about who is in the State House of Assembly, who is a councillor, who is the chairman of a local government. Seldom do we even care about who is our senator or who is our member of the House of Representatives. Unless otherwise, we take more than a passive interest in who our leaders are. And these leaders must be looked at from the lowest of the low, which is the councillor, down to the presidency. I think we will certainly be getting things wrong. And I also like to align my thought to Ezenwa's position on citizens' oversight. Yes, we are talking about priority spending. We're talking about even budget implementation per se or in its entirety. As long as we do not know even what has been budgeted, what is the receipt by each local government, and how are those receipts or revenues expended, how do we even have the oversight? And I think we go back to, again, the fundamental issue. If Nigerians are made to pay taxes and they are paying the taxes, people will naturally take interest in how are those monies spent. This country probably got it wrong when we discovered oil, and then revenues were no longer coming from taxation, we're just coming from royalties, or you just scratch ground, you get oil, you sell the oil. So why do I bother how those spendings are done? So there has to be some holistic approach to trying to unravel what are these issues, because they are multifaceted, they are multidimensional, and they are a bit complex. And just looking at the issues within the purview of priority spendings or how the budget process takes place, I think we will not be able to do justice to the topic. And last but not the least, Dr. Aminu's position as regards to development planning, I think no one needs to say even much more than that. This country have had it so excellently well done in the earlier part of our history when we were doing development planning, and as soon as the military came into power, the 5th development plan was implemented, and it ended, and there was no any development planning until I think sometime during the era of late Sani Abacha that wanted to do 2020, Vision 2020. Today, I can say that we are gradually coming back to development planning process, because today we have the Vision 2020 plan. Even then, the plan appears to be just on paper and in the shelf of ministries and departments and agencies, because hardly do you hear annual budget benchmarking the implementation of the Vision 2020. And this Vision 2020, if you remember, we had what was called SEED, which is State Economic Empowerment Development Plan, the LEAD, which was for the local government, and the NEED, which was for the state. And these were all done with a view to emphasizing priority areas of spending for the development of the national economy. And all these, where are they today? They probably have gathered so much dust that no one even wants to touch them.
Shuaibu Idris, speaking from our Lagos Network Center, thank you very much there for the points that you have raised. Just as well, now, Abacha's attempt was at Vision 2010. And then the revisionists started saying, look, Vision 2010 isn't a perfect vision. You need Vision 2020. So the government now also came up with Vision 2020, again, to make his point. I was just wondering, Ezenwa, part of what you have said, and indeed what all the others acknowledge, is that citizens' oversights pass their budgets in less than 1 week. 24 hours. They got 24 hours. The governor tables it perfunctorily, and then the lawmakers, if they are not fighting, they don't do and then
they endorse it immediately.
And they endorse it. And then it goes on and on. Inherent.
Look, they see themselves more as special. Approved salary groups and organizations have no components for if you are going to be supported by donors, they will support you to look at what we call the national budget. If there are organizations, very few organizations are now cascading their interest down to the local government. And the resistance is much. I can tell you about the organization that is called Follow the Money, for instance, that is taking both state budgets and going to the communities and say, hey, after going to Ministry of Finance, finding out that the money has been released, they go to the community and say, are you aware that this money has been released for this project in your community? First, because of the nature and the complex nature that our colleague from Lagos talked about, both the traditional institution, unfortunately, is also enmeshed in the resistance that I talk about. So you call the community and say, are you aware this has been released for your budget? You get a call and say, oh, these are my political opponents working. Sometimes the police is even involved to disperse a town hall that is meant to address. So these are real issues in terms of organizing the local subnational areas for development. But beyond all of that is to begin to say, for instance, is there a way we can have the economy of those places? The economy of Britain is developed by British people. The economy of American people is developed by the Americans. Until we have the economy, if you go to Zamfara now, there's Arabian gum in Zamfara that is exported. But nobody is interested in that. Nobody cares about those things. Everywhere in our communities, the economy of those places can by themselves galvanize those areas. But there is nobody driving, because the man does not see himself as an agent of development. He sees himself more as an agent of patronage and all of that. So he goes to the governor. The governor says, okay, of course, the money is with the governor anyway. So he decides what he gives him. And then he says, look, this is what you have to do, this is what you have to do. And if he likes it, does it, there are no... Now, you talked about the state assembly. Let's be clear. When I talked about the leadership recruitment process in the states, it comes to a point where the governors for their political party and give. You are the one to run for state house of assembly. You are the one to go for this. You are the one, and then... Because the man didn't buy form, he is not contesting any election, he owes everything. Let us see, for instance, where you have a contestation for giving autonomy to legislators themselves. Those legislators rejected their own autonomy. Where has it happened?
Where has it happened? So what Ezenwa has raised is of poor implementation of budget.
All other exams by the State House Assembly. Now, if the Constitution has given you the law to do this, what has gone wrong? It is not that we have not been conscious of where development is supposed to establish, but our choice, forgetting that every opportunity we have to govern is limited by 4 years or maximum of 8 years. Because each time I come here, I get excited because I know that the governors who have left office since 1999 to date are in regrets because they failed to use the spirit of this Constitution to lay foundation for the development of this country. There is no way you will say today that the interpretation given here, clearly stated, is subsumed into the provision of Section 7, which says the governance at local government level is hereby guaranteed by the Constitution. And then Section 7 says, and laws made by the State House Assembly. It is to complement the existence of local government system in the manner that the state cannot exist without proper functioning of the local government system. So that is where we got it wrong, because we saw the opportunity to govern as opportunity for enrichment or for power and authority, and forgetting that we are limited by the same constitution to be a maximum of 4 years. There is no way, like the gentleman said, a local government chairman, for instance, I said it started collapsing fully from our time, because we tried, with due respect and all humility, to ensure that we were local government chairmen, to live in our local government system and practice what we thought the law gave us opportunity to do. And we were not allowed to come back. Not that we were not popular to be re-elected any time in our local government up to this moment, but we were not allowed, the election was not even allowed to be held. Even the elections that were held in our place were suspended for 3 years, and caretakers were appointed. So there's no way.
Some governors argue that all their development plan are centered on local government.
No.
Roads constructed,
with due respect,
cut across local governments. But, you know, but these are the arguments that are putting across.
There are different stages of road networks that you can do. The consumer wasn't blind when he gave these specific responsibilities
to the local government level. Because
so, no, it's not. It is a deliberate
misinterpretation.
It's deliberate misinterpretation to harness and usurp the functions of the people. Remember that people are living in local government areas. They have this congruence, this organic relationship as to how they live their life. And if the state governments are saying that the package, I mean, they include all the developmental programs in state levels, for God's sake, why was the local government system created in the first place? The essence of local government system is to lead people in their domain, develop their human capital, develop their economic activities in such a way that there is less attraction to move to the state and move to the federal government. But today we have usurped the functions of this system in a manner that, like you said, everybody is compromised because nobody goes there on merit. When we're elected on non-party basis. But today, just like you said, the governors determine the number of funds to be printed and who should come in as a councillor, a local government chairman, and so on and so forth. So we got it wrong from when our predecessors and those on seats today think that once they become governors, they will not leave that seat again and therefore start misapplying the laws as it is, misinterpreting the laws as it is today. So the only way you will find a local government chairman to go back to his local government and function is that he is covered statutorily by the law, and the federal government should be seen to be protecting the existence of the local government system. And that was why one of the requirements we said was that when people were clamoring for restructuring and federalism, we must anchor our Nigerian federalism to the background the Nigerian system gave birth to, because we were an amalgamation of people with different backgrounds. Some were traditionalists, some were having Islamic backgrounds, some were Christian, some were pagans, and some had their own traditional form of government. And it will interest us that all the states in this country were created because of the histories of the respective kingdoms that were existent in given areas. So when we're ruling, we're putting a government in place, we must bring back those values that continue to hold us together. If we don't do that and give these people back their right, we will forever continue to have this discordance in implementing programs. And for as long as today, the federal government does not rise up to this responsibility to ensure the amendment of the Constitution, which is already just at the point of implementation now, to give local government autonomy, we're going to continue to move backwards and put in place a national commission for local governments. That is the kind of restructuring we should be looking for.
Issues with presidential system of government?
No, presidential system of government is anchored on your needs. There is no standard international definition of presidential system of government.
But we cannot implement
it.
You
will put your presidential system of government as your needs, defines for you. Americans have a different type of presidential system of government. India have a different presidential system of government. China today have a presidential system of government as their needs, defines it for them. We must look inwards to put our structure in a way that it suits and solves our problems.
Okay. All right, Alhaji Sabo Kiana, thank you very much. There are a number of points to talk about at the subnational level. I'm sure that, for those who are sufficiently experienced, they will recall what local governments used to do in those days.
Fantastic.
How they used to construct rural roads, how they maintained dispensaries, so-called health centers, how they provided water and all of that, which we are not seeing in our country today. But we'll continue with the conversation and all our guests after this short break.
kill you. Move now.
To they disobey traffic law, they cause accidents. Me, I don't talk, say, I no go dey do am again, because change begins with me.
I will no longer endanger my life crossing the express. Instead, I will use the bridge, because change begins with me.
Oga driver, stop this bus now, won't come down. I be one carry me past where they go.
Make I dey stop anyhow for road, they cause traffic wahala and accidents. So I go dey stop for the right bus stop, because change begins with me.
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, welcome back, Alice. Still Good Morning Nigeria, live for the network service of Africa's largest television network, the NTA. We still have all of our guests with us. Let's bring in now Dr. Amina Usman of Department of Economics at Kaduna State University. We know that we've talked about local governments and how prostrate they are on account of the experience already articulated for us by Alhaji Sabo Kiana, former chairman of Kiana local government. That's one thing that I would like you to address, in addition to other responses that you may have to the comments already made by the other guests. And this is as follows. Even at the national level, talking about processing, I hear this repeatedly, and sometimes I'm taken aback. People will tell you that budgets are mere estimates. They are mere estimates. A law is not a mere law. Yeah, a budget, of course, becomes your appropriation law, or it becomes your appropriation act. Yes, some of the assumptions might change in the course of time, but the spirit of the budget ought to be carried through. And where, therefore, you continue to have this dismal level of implementation, some people will say there's no reason why we would not remain the poverty capital of the world, right up from the local government level, 774 of them, to the FCT plus 36 states, and then, of course, the national government. But what, in your opinion, is wrong with state governments and the way they seek to implement their budgets through what ordinarily should be priority spend?
Well, I think we have to look at it that generally, even the federal government have been custom budgets that are sufficiently, all the capital expenditure is to be funded through loan, which we have seen in the last 3-4 years, the gradual build-up of huge debt that probably our own production capacity will not be able to pay. Now, but state governments are a special case. Special governors are, somebody once wrote, imperial governors. They have this arrogance that as individuals, they are like gatekeepers. Now, you cannot access the federal government without their blessing. And they have access to the grassroots to impose what they wanted. So that gives them some kind of arrogance, that they do things, they think that they're thinking. I mean, no commissioner has the gut to go and tell the governor what to do, let alone a local government chairman. Now, and most of them have accumulated so much debt that when their allocation comes, it can only pay salaries and then some little debt. What they wanted to actually boost their ego is the local government funds. They believe that they should be the ones to implement what the local government wants. So the issue is that until we have a system, and which is very difficult, and what I expected was, this administration in particular, President Buhari is judged as a very strong-willed person, very capable of actually changing things. That's why the change mantra actually resumed with people. Now, is that he can be able to push through reforms of state-local government relationship seriously. But state government seems to overpower him. Collectively, even if you take anything that has to do with reforming local government, it has to go to state assembly for, and then there's no state assembly in this country. As far as I'm concerned, that layer of government should be dispelled with, because these are people that don't even have a voice. I mean, I had a speaker calling the governor my boss, a speaker of State House of Assembly. calling the governor his boss. So how do you expect that one to actually derive any change? No, he only rubber stamp what the governor wanted. And nobody in the assembly will stand up and challenge what the government is doing.
It will be set on suspension.
It will be set on suspension. So perhaps we need to actually shift focus from the state and local government and then put pressure on the Mr. President that he has the capacity. Let him use the assumed strong political will that he has to actually pose certain changes. Otherwise, we will never see the kind of development we're expecting. Because state governments are all about patronage. Whoever comes, look, have you ever seen a senator that challenges a governor and come back to the Senate? Not even talk about local government chairman or anybody. I once had a governor saying that, look, to remove your commissioner is, to remove my cap from my head is more difficult than removing a commissioner. So what do you expect anybody? Everybody is subservient. You either do exactly as is wanted or not. In fact, we are now reaching a stage. But I think one good thing that I've noticed, as far as this recent election is concerned, is that some people have decided, some states have started becoming sophisticated enough to tell some of the governors that we are tied up your rubbish. Because I've seen about 5 sitting governors that has been defeated. That's something that we need to actually continue to hammer and expect that other states will also be as sophisticated, so that a person comes, did not meet up to expectation, the people will remove him, regardless of the part of that. At the first election, they elected APC. At the second election, they voted him out. Something like that. So that tells you that gradually people are becoming interested in what is happening to their state. But it's going to take some time before it becomes permeative.
All right. It will take some time before that permeates. Thank you for your analysis. But this time around, let's return to Shoaibu Idris in Lagos, who is a financial analyst. Well, you have actually listened to some of the guests on the issue of the sub-national governments with respect to budgeting activities and process. Now, I'd like you to come in here with a view to letting us understand how the budgeting behaviorals of governors in the states of Nigeria can be checkmated, because presently it does appear that local government has gradually been phased out, in terms of being given the status that it really requires, according to the Constitution read out to us here by Keyena. Now, what is, in your own view, should Nigeria be doing at this point? Because budgeting is about life, it's about sustaining development of a country, and ours is a developing nation that requires a well-structured budget that can lead to even development of this country. What's your take?
Thank you very much, Kiriam. But before I answer your question, I'd like to comment on maybe 1 or 2 issues that were discussed before you came to me. Number one, I think we need to tread on the path of caution. Local governments still exist, they still function, and they have been paying salaries and maintaining primary school teachers and the schools in virtually all the 774 local governments that we have in the country. There are still some dispensaries, hospitals, primary health care centers, as they are called today in most part of the country. They are being maintained and sustained by the local government. Again, the local governments are also shouldering responsibility of traditional institution, payment of salaries of district heads and other traditional institutions. No two way about it, they can do better and there is room for improvement. Second issue, Kingsley did mention the fact that are budget mere estimate? Are they just figures just for fancy? Certainly, a lot of people do think that way, but the major issues are, number one, budgets are, provisional figures. They are estimate. They are, if you like, a view of the future of the inflows of money into government coffers and what the government might wish to do with the money. So therefore, to the extent that these are future provisions, and if the monies don't come, the figures remain mere estimate. if you like, even guesstimate. Guesswork plus estimation gives you guesstimate. So therefore, budgets are there. They are supposed to be implemented to the letter only if the revenues as targeted are met. If the revenues are not met, then obviously you have issues as regards the implementation of the budget. Third comment is on priority spending. In a situation where we are running a presidential system of government that is so expensive, and times with that number, analysts and researchers have commented that this system of government is too expensive for us. We probably need to take a cursory look at this presidential system of government and see, should we continue to even have it? This is not part of this discussion, but then it has formed part of this discussion because recurrent expenditure that involves the running of presidential government takes close to about 75 to 80% of our income. As long as you have recurrent expenditure taking up to 80% of your income, how will you be able to even implement priority capital spending? Spending that will need to elicit and ginger development into the economy. I mean, it's near impossible to do that as long as we are running this system of government that tends to be a little bit lopsided. If you look at, a situation we have today, from the national level to state and the local government, what is the proportion of the workers, say, in local government versus the population in a local government? How much are those workers earning and taking home versus what is actually given back to the society as, as development, in form of development project? And last comment is, I think we also need to be a little careful and realistic here. Where and which space are these state governors operating? Are they operating outside the local government? Is there any state that you can say this is a state that is not operating within, local governments in a particular state? Therefore, where and when state government do budget, where and when state governors implement budget and, construct roads, either hospitals or schools, they are still being constructed in the local government. What has happened is a kind of a measure of function, a usurpation of function of local government by the state arising from the refusal of most state governors to allow the independent of the local government, so that the local government can construct the feeder roads and can do the few little development projects that they are expected to do. And I have come across a state recently where the state government is even constructing gutters. And somebody will just wonder, why will a state governor and indeed a state government condescend to the level of handling the drainage system? These are supposed to be within the purview of local government, but yet the state has usurped. And I think we naturally need to look at the process of selecting, leaders, like I did say, not just state governors, not just local government chairmen and councillors. And if I may add, Ezenwa did allude to the fact that most of the local government chairmen can't even stay in their local government. They only go there to sign vouchers or checks. Why and how will they stay when there are no resources given to them? The governors have taken the funds, and therefore there is no money in the local government. The chairman goes there. He can't even give a little handout to one or two people that may come to say, hello, sir, and he or she has a problem. So obviously, when Jibril Sabo Kiana was chairman of Kiana local government, if you remember Jibril, you came to me, I was assistant general manager in Liberty Bank. We gave you a loan. You did handle some project in Kiana. I remember those days that you were chairman and you were coming and you were running the system. So today, where and how will any chairman go to a local government and stay when there are no funds? These are some of the lacunas that over the years we have tend to be bedeviled with, and they appear not to be in sight. Last but not the least, Professor Aminu's position that President Buhari should work towards strengthening the local government. The unfortunate thing is we have a challenge. We have a challenge, and that challenge is you cannot touch the local government. You can't even touch the state because it's presidential system of government. The governors don't report to Mr. President. They are independent of the center, and they are supposed to be checkmated by the state houses of assembly. You have also alluded to the fact that it is clearly probably better for us to scrap the state houses of assembly because none of the state houses of assembly is ever functioning as it is supposed to function.
All right. Shuaibu Idris, thank you very much. I mean, you've spent quite a while. We have a number of tweets to also take. Can you respond to this question I'm about to ask? Because I'll give the benefit to the other guests to also respond if we still have time. But very briefly, now, as part of what we hear in terms of the bloating of the recurrent expenditure at all tiers of government, but most especially, you hear that at the subnational level, they will tell you that the persons that they have employed, that they are Nigerians, and they have to pay them. And that is why they will spend 90% of their budget on recurrent, that they are Nigerians, they will spend the money in the economy. How realistic is that if that shouldn't ordinarily be priority spending? And amongst those who are also on the take are the traditional institutions. And people sometimes ask, look, what is, I mean, if you like, what is the value ultimately derivable from local governments paying some traditional rulers or both traditional rulers in their domain? Very briefly.
Kirian, I think it will be most uncharitable for anybody to say because we have employed Nigerians and therefore we should pay them. I think what is most important is there is need at all tiers of government, from the federal to state and local government. We should do what is called right sizing. Whether that means reduction in number of workforce, I think we need to do them. Anybody who does not have value to add, why should any part of Nigeria pay him or her salary? I mean, you have value to add, then you are paid salary. You don't have value to add, somehow, somewhere government can find another avenue to help you. As regards the traditional institution, I think this debate has been going on for quite some time. I think in my limited understanding of the traditional institution, they still have some value to add, and therefore we could do with a little bit of some of them, but we may be able to streamline and also reduce the quantum of, say, the district heads that we may have, and the Meanguas and some of them that we probably need not to pay them salary. And last but not the least, we could also use these traditional institutions for registration of birth and death, and then payment of a token fee for those forms, and that way you can generate income to be able to sustain them.
So, Kingsley, in some states where we have autonomous communities, you seem to have more chiefs or more igwes, than ever before. So it's on the increase. And in some states, the state governments are buying cars for them. In fact, pay them directly. Local government is entirely out of it.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. But that's part of what we are saying now. Nationwide, should that be priority spend? Yesterday, if you recall on this program when we had our guests, I mean, there was one example we cited. The federal government is now saying that it wants to establish processing industries for cashew in Kogi, in Benue, in Enugu. Is that the business of the federal government? Where are the local governments? Where are the state governments?
Meanwhile, the Enugu you mentioned, we have a cashew industry that existed before I was born. But it has been abandoned over the years. Let's bring in...
But in the meantime, we are paying salaries.
Let's bring in SNY here for your last...
My quick thought is that democracy does not contemplate what Prof was talking about in terms of the strong will. We need to create democrats at every level, people who understand this, not necessarily one person who wields the big stick. I see us always wanting to do that, always wanting to create personality cults in our country, people who will, but until the man who is in the legislature, the man who is in the judiciary sees his functions and understands that he does not need an influence somewhere to do that, then that for me is important. Yeah.
All right, Dr. Osman, your response very quickly.
Well, two things, yes. I agree with everyone. I never believe in strong individuals, but actually strong systems. And part of what I'm saying is that the president should be able to develop strong systems that can be able to checkmate things that are not working well. Once you have a president or a government that actually sets the tone properly, then all others will key in on it. And then lastly, what Shuaibu said with regards to right-sizing. Yes, I know a state who have actually right-sized probably more than 50,000 people from its workforce. But then what did it do with the money? It quadruple. I mean, it's ordinarily an SA to the governor by revenue mobilization is supposed to be paid about 45,000 naira per month. But they are paying those people about 400, 500,000. So he robbed the state workers, and then you are paying his SS.
We'll stop you there, and let's get from Kiana. Just in 20 seconds, please.
Yeah, first and most important is to ask that, and I want to align myself with Prof, that the national government should find a way, through consensus, through mobilization, through awareness, to ensure the coming to existence of an autonomous local government system where the national elections shall be conducted by a national body, where the activities shall be also coordinated by National Commission for Local Government System. These are the structures that we need to restructure, not the other way around.
All right, thank you very much. What you just said, Kiana, well, of course, will raise issues of true federalism and therefore what to do. But perhaps there are special national circumstances that may warrant this as an interim measure.
Remember, we have
a number of tweets now. Dele Jack Solomon, let's take them very quickly. We have received them a while ago. We just allowed our guests to roll. Dele Jack Solomon, truth be told, there's not much difference between the central and state governments in terms of their budget template and priority spending, because both levels of government prioritize recurrent expenditures over capital.
Salihu Babai, apart from the budget of federal government, most state governments are presented and passed within a month because the governors have pocketed the state assemblies.
Now, Law Alpha say borrowing to fund the budget may boomerang, but focusing to raise funds internally will go a long way in helping to revive the economy.
Nigerians have not really, from Festus Akimbe, not really benefited from the billions budgeted every year by different levels of government in our country due to apparent lack of good financial management systems and processes for tracking resource utilization.
Ahmed Ibrahim Idris. Now, budget is the backbone of the country, and without budgeting, there would be no economic standardization. But the problem that persists is proper implementation.
Now, Ahmed Idris, budget is the... When you read that now from Sakiru, Nigeria has been having a perfect budget planning and a perfect presentation, but insincerity of purpose and selfish interest are the disadvantages of the budget implementation system.
And then, of course, you have others from Comrade Ungala, Daniel Dugule. This is from Daniel Dugule. Let me just take this one very quickly. It says, from 1999, local governments in my state, it doesn't state the state, have been run as governor's personal enterprise, where they nominate their loyalists and who are paid salaries, whatever amount that governor provides. Now, 2007, he writes, was the first time that we had a project chairman, but he was removed because of that.
Okay. At this point, gentlemen, we'd like to thank you for your contributions. Dr. Aminu Usman, Associate Professor of Economics at Kaduna State University, thank you so much for your contribution. And as of course, a regular face here on Good Morning Nigeria, it's been a pleasure having you this morning. Jibril Sabo Kena, former chairman, Kena local government area of Nasarawa State. That was when local government was working.
That's what I keep saying.
When we were able to borrow money from a bank, and it's a good project.
That was what. That was the joy.
It can't happen again now, from all indications. And I would like to also thank Shaibu Idris, a financial analyst who spoke to us all the way from Lagos. Thank you, gentlemen, for your take in this conversation.
All right, and that also does it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. We'd like to thank you for your tweets and indeed for watching. We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, do enjoy the rest of your day. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Kieran Umar. It's been a pleasure having you this morning on our Good Morning Show. See you again tomorrow.